Welcome, 102 students, to this remote lecture. Today we are going to go through the first part of Henry IV, the entire play. So buckle your seatbelts. This is going to be probably a little bit longer lecture, but hopefully an entertaining lecture as well. All right, a couple of items of business before we get started. First of all, if you have any questions, there's a couple of methods that you can get those answered. First and foremost is our questions forum on Canvas. You can post questions there. That way your peers can see those questions, and chances are someone has the same question you have. Okay, you can also email me and get your question answered that way. Or you can bring your question to class for next time that we meet. All right, so in today's lecture, I want you to be attentive, and every once in a while I'm going to ask you your opinion about a certain passage, and so go ahead and pause the lecture at that point, write down your opinion and maybe some evidence that you use to form that opinion, and turn that in as proof that you participated in today's lecture. So I'll let you know when one of those comes up, and you can do that process. Okay, pause and write, and then submit at the end. All right, so before we begin, let's go ahead and get into a Shakespearean mindset. Okay, if you cast your minds back to when we did the pre-reading for Henry IV, we had this quote from Richard II, "For God's sake, let us sit upon the ground and tell the sad stories of the death of kings." So that's kind of what I want to do. I want to have this be kind of story time, where we sit down with the text. We're going to go through it together, and we're going to really get a sense for this play. Okay, it needs to be discussed. Unfortunately, because we want to watch a performance of this a couple of times, we don't really have an opportunity to discuss it outside this lecture and also our forums, but we want to make sure that we do have this dialogue. So that's one of the reasons why I want you to submit your opinions on certain passages in this play. Okay, you won't come to an understanding the first time you read this play. I've read it probably about 20 times, and I'm starting to get an understanding. So it is a difficult text, but hopefully as we go through it several different times, you can start to come to that understanding. Okay, it's challenging, but hopefully the challenge will be rewarding. Okay, so the way this will be formatted is we're just going to go straight through the text, scene by scene. We're going to pull out some important passages and kind of go through it that way. So I'm going to be switching back and forth from my PowerPoint slide here that will introduce each of the scenes, and then we're going to dive into the text itself, and hopefully that's a smooth process, and we can get things rolling here. All right, Act 1, Scene 1 opens up our play. Okay, this takes place in London, in the palace. Okay, the important figures in this scene are the King, Henry IV, also known as Bolingbroke, and the Earl of Westmoreland. Okay, and also at the end here, when I introduce a scene, I'll kind of give you some small points to look forward to, what we're going to talk about. Okay, so what kind of war does Henry the Fourth want, and what kind of son does he have? What kind of son does he wish that he has? Okay, so we're going to switch over. If I can find my plate here. All right. So here is our text. Again, I'll have highlighted passages that are relevant to the things we want to talk about in the scene. So we'll go ahead and scroll down to the first couple. Okay. As we remember from our pre-reading, the realm is kind of shaky right now. Henry IV had to take the kingdom from Richard II, and we can see the realm is in a state of furious close of civil butchery. Okay, when you're in a civil war, okay, you're fighting yourself. Okay, and Henry the Fourth compares it to an ill-sheathed knife. Okay, when a knife isn't well protected, you're going to cut yourself on it. Okay, and he wants to change this. And how he wants to change this is to shift or find some way to bring the realm together. And what's the best way to do that? Well, that's to have a war with someone else other than yourself. And he says he wants to go as far as the sepulchre of Christ. He wants to go on a crusade, and this will shift the attention from maybe his shaky beginnings and solidify his rule over the kingdom. All right. Well, it comes to his attention that he can't do this. The civil problems are way too much to leave the realm, and there's a lot of bad things that are happening. He's being attacked by both Douglas the Scot and Owen Glendower, the Welsh warlord, and so these two things need to be taken care of before they can go on a crusade. So there is a little bit of light at the end of this meeting where the Earl of Westmoreland talks about Henry Percy. Hotspur has defeated Douglas the Scot 3 times and has taken a lot of prisoners. He says, as we come down here to our next passage, okay, in faith, it is a conquest for a prince to boast of, and this makes Henry sad. He says, "Yea, there thou makest me sad, and makest me sin in envy of my lord Northumberland, should be the father to so blessed a son." Okay, so he wishes that his son was as good as Hotspur. Okay, and he says, "Oh, that it could be proved that some night-tripping fairy had exchanged in cradle clothes our children where they lay, and called mine Percy Plantagenet, then I would have his Harry, and he mine." So both Henry IV and Henry Percy both have sons named Henry or Harry, and he wishes that they were switched, so he would have the noble son who defeats Scots, and Percy could have the degenerate son that he thinks Hal is. All right, so our first opinion that I want you to kind of come up with and write for this lecture is, what kind of father do you think Henry V, or not Henry V, Henry IV was? Is he a good father? for bringing this up? Is he a bad father? What's your opinion? So go ahead and pause the video and write down your opinion. Maybe find some evidence from the text to support that, and we'll come back and we will start off with scene 2. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you wrote down your opinion about whether or not Henry IV is a good father or not, and this might be something we'll come back to as it's kind of a theme within the play. All right, Act 1, Scene 2. Okay, this takes place in London, in Hal's house. Okay, some main characters we have is Hal, Falstaff, and Poins. Okay, the things we're going to kind of talk about are to hang a thief or not hang a thief. Okay, to steal a purse, and this idea of contrast. All right, let's switch back over to our text. Scroll down to Scene 2. Okay, Scene 2. All right, so we start off with kind of an introduction to Falstaff, and this is Sir John Falstaff. He goes by Jack, which it has kind of a double meaning to it. A Jack is a person who isn't who they say they are, and Falstaff is a Jack. He's not a good knight, but he may have other redeeming qualities. That might be an opinion that is going to come up later, but we'll kind of see his actions first before we ask that opinion. Okay, he starts off our scene by saying, "Now, Hal, what time of day is it, lad?" And this is kind of a theme that we'll see throughout the play, is time of day, and what the characters think about the time of day. Okay, so Hal's response, he talks about all the things that Falstaff likes to do, such as drinking, eating, and sleeping with the ladies, and he says, "I see no reason why thou should be so superfluous to demand the time of day." So the company that Hal keeps, they have little or no responsibilities, so why should they be concerned about what time it is? Again, this is a concept that we'll come back to in some more scenes, and we'll see if Hal has this same mentality that he's accusing his friends of having. Okay. All right, so we'll scroll down to the next passage. Okay. Falstaff has a question, and it's kind of a burning question in his mind, and we'll kind of see why here in a minute. But he says, "But I pray thee, sweet wag, shall there be gallows standing in England when thou art king? Do not thou, when thou art king, hang a thief." Okay, Falstaff wants to know if when Hal becomes king, will he hang thieves? Now, this is he's asking this question because, of course, Falstaff is a thief. And so he's asking, are you going to hang thieves when you're king because you are friends with thieves? And he's kind of hinting towards, you wouldn't hang us. We're good people, right? We're going to be good when you're king. And Hal kind of hedges the question and says, no, thou shalt. And Falstaff thinks this is an interesting idea, and he says, "Oh, rare." And he and Hal says that he'll be a rare hangman. That's kind of got a double meaning in that it would be rare for a thief to be a hangman, and therefore he would make hangings rare. Okay. Shakespeare really likes to do this wordplay, okay, and once you know these word plays are in there and can kind of catch them, it really becomes a satisfying sort of reward. Okay, now Falstaff talks about going out and stealing purses, and the prince kind of decides to kind of go along with this, but Hal says, you should amend your life, okay, and leave this life of thievery. And Falstaff's response to this is, "Why, Hal, 'tis my vocation, Hal, 'tis no sin for a man to labor in his vocation." So that's something to think about. Is a thief just out there doing his job? Is it wrong for him to do what is necessary in order to have a quality life? And obviously Falstaff believes that it's not wrong to labor in someone's calling or chosen vocation. Alright, so now we have Poins entering the scene. If we remember from our pre-reading, Poins is Hal's gentleman-in-waiting. He's the one that's supposed to be around to help him and make sure he stays out of trouble. But Poins actually likes getting into trouble, and specifically getting in trouble with Hal. Alright, so Poins comes in and talks about a place in which they can steal a fat purse, lots of money that they can steal. And at first Hal doesn't really want anything to do with that, but he's got Falstaff convinced immediately, and so Poins asks Falstaff to leave, and so that he can talk to Hal and maybe convince him to go take this purse. One thing that language-wise we want to look for is what sort of adjectives are the characters using to describe Hal and other characters. Here we have Poins calling Hal sweet honey lord. And as we see, especially when Henry IV starts talking to Hal, what sort of adjectives come out when they talk as well. And we'll see that his friends try to sugar him up because they want something from him, and we'll see if any other characters had that same kind of mentality. Okay. So in short, Poins convinces Henry to go take the purse with them, but the reason why Hal decides to go is because Poins wants to pull a giant joke on Falstaff and the rest of the thieves by letting them take the purse and then disguising themselves so that they can take the money from Falstaff, and then sit back and see what lies Falstaff will tell in order to say that they no longer have the money. And so that's Poins' idea, and Hal thinks that's going to be super funny. so he decides to go along with it. Now, Henry, or sorry, I will try to refer to Hal as Hal because there are so many Henrys. But Hal kind of gives us a soliloquy here. So this is a time when he's talking to himself and about himself and his state of mind. And we'll just kind of read it, and basically he talks about the reasons why he's living the way he is, and why he thinks it's okay for him to live this way. Okay. Yet herein I will imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, that when he, pleased again to be himself, be wanted, he may be more wondered at, by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapors that did seem to strangle him. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be tedious as work. But when they seldom come, they wished for come, and nothing pleaseth but rare accidents. So, when this loose behavior I throw off, and pay my debt I never promised, but how much better than my word I am. But so much shall I falsify men's hopes, and like bright metal on sullen ground, by reformation glittering o'er my faults, shall shore more goodly and attract more eyes than that which hath no foil to set it off. I'll so offend to make offense a skill, redeeming time when men think I least I will. Okay, so what do we have here? Basically, he's saying that I will set up this huge contrast. Okay, that was our word that we were talking about for this section, is contrast. He wants to imitate the sun. Okay, there's sunny days and there's cloudy days, especially in Britain. Okay, it's often cloudy, but when the sun does come out, we love the sun that much more because there's this contrast. So he's saying, I am going to be riotous. I'm going to do the things that I'm not supposed to do, so people will have very low expectations of me. And then when I throw this life off and become a good king, people will say, oh, look at that beautiful transformation. He was this irresponsible kid, and now he's this brilliant king, and because of this contrast, they're going to think that's going to be great. I'll learn how to offend people so that I can use that as a skill later. And I think not so much in this play, but when he gets to be Henry V, we do see him use offense as a skill, and if we have time, we may look into that. Okay. So it's time for another opinion. So in a minute, go ahead and pause and write your opinion. So what do you think about Hal's logic here? Is setting up a contrast like this a good means of swaying public opinion? Okay. Can people be judged this way? Okay, so go ahead and pause your video, and then we will move on to Act 1, Scene 3. All right, welcome back. We are moving on to Scene 3. Hopefully you wrote your opinion about contrast. Okay, Scene 3 brings us to the London Palace again. This time we've got King Henry the Fourth, Bolingbroke. That's going to be important for this scene. We also have Hotspur, Harry Percy, and also Henry Percy, his father. And we have Worcester or Thomas Percy, okay, who eventually become the leaders of the rebels. All right. So some key things we're going to talk about in this scene. Why did Hotspur withhold his prisoners? And will we have a rebellion? All right. So back in scene 1, we learned that Hotspur defeated Douglas. Okay. And when he defeated Douglas, he took some prisoners, and he was supposed to deliver them to the king. However, his uncle was whispering in his ear, and the prisoners were not delivered. Okay, so the king brings Hotspur and Worcester and Northumberland, Harry Percy in there, and he's asking, why did you deny me my prisoners? Okay, and Hotspur says, my liege, I did deny no prisoners. Okay, a flat out denial that he did. Okay, well, technically that's true. He did let him have one prisoner. Okay, but he gives some excuses of why he refused to give prisoners. Okay, basically, it was at the end of the battle. He was bloody and tired from fighting, and all of a sudden, this clean man comes up and asks for his prisoners. So he says, he questioned me amongst the rest, demanded my prisoners in your majesty's behalf. Okay, he describes him as a popinjay. Okay, which, if we kind of look at that meaning, is just kind of this this parrot of a man. Okay, he's not a soldier. He doesn't understand what just happened there, the gruesome battle, and he smelled like a milliner. He was perfumed, and Hotspur answers, I answered neglectingly, I know not what. Okay, he knows what he answered him, but he's very much hedging the king and saying, how the drums and guns and wounds, it was the heat of the battle, just afterwards, and I just couldn't give him to that man that didn't understand what we had just been through. Okay. So, is this a good explanation? Okay. Sir Walter Blunt thinks so. He's like, this is a reasonable explanation. However, the king is not so easily swayed. Okay, and he says, why yet he doth deny his prisoners. Okay, the heat of the battle's over. He's cleaned up. Why haven't the prisoners been delivered to him? Well, he says it's with proviso and exception that we at our own charge shall ransom straight his brother-in-law, the foolish Mortimer. Okay, if we remember back to our pre-reading, Mortimer is the brother of Hotspur's wife, and Mortimer was supposed to take care of the other part of the civil war in Wales and defeat Glendower. However, He abandoned his men. 1,000 soldiers were killed, and then he was taken for ransom and ended up marrying Glendower's daughter. So this is not someone that the king thinks he should pay to get back. Okay, shall our coffers then be emptied to redeem a traitor home? Okay, for I shall never hold that man my friend, whose tongue shall ask me 1 penny's cost to ransom home revolted Mortimer. King doesn't like Mortimer. Okay, and that really makes Hotspur mad. He yells out, "Revolted Mortimer! He never did fall off my sovereign liege, but by the chance of war." Okay, so Hotspur believes that, it was the chance of war, that he lost the battle. Okay, but do we believe that? Okay. So anyways, the king demands the prisoner should be sent to him, and he releases Hotspur, Northumberland, and Worcester. Okay. Now, Hotspur's still quite mad. They're kind of out of the earshot of the king. Okay, and we hear some reasons why these men would like to start a rebellion. Okay. Okay, ingrate and cankered Bolingbroke. So now instead of calling him, His Majesty, or even, Henry the Fourth, okay, he's back to Bolingbroke. Okay, and this is kind of an insult to him because he's not of the line of kings that was previous there. So he's Bolingbroke. He's not over on Richard's side. Okay. Okay, and now it comes out, did King Richard then proclaim my brother Edmund Mortimer heir to the crown? Northumberland thinks so. Okay, he did. Myself did hear it. And Hotspur, now seeing this side of the argument, says, nay, then I cannot blame this cousin king. Okay, so suddenly we've gone from king to Bolingbroke to now cousin king. So he's saying, the line from Richard, they were cousins. So now, they're just cousins. That's not a connection. Whereas, the direct line to my brother Mortimer, that's more direct than being cousins. Okay, and then we come back to these adjectives. Okay, to put down Richard, that sweet, lovely rose, and plant this thorn, this canker, Bolingbroke. So again, we have that word sweet. And remember that Hal was called Sweet Honey Lord. And when we get to when Henry, when the king and Hal are talking, some of these adjectives come back up. Okay. We also have rose in here. Of course, this is the War of the Roses. Lancaster and York. Again, we've got some symbolism there. Okay. We've got more reference to Bolingbroke. Okay, this vile politician Bolingbroke. Okay, this is another time when we want to pause and kind of get your opinion on this. So here Hotspur is using the word politician as very much an insult. Okay, he would rather have a king who is born to rule than a politician, someone who sways the minds of others to to their cause. Now, today, do we pretty much prefer politicians, right? So that comes to your opinion. Now, what is your opinion about the use of the word politician here? Okay, how has that word changed? Do you prefer politicians to people who rule otherwise? And just kind of your opinion on that word. So go ahead and pause the video and get your quick opinion about that. All right, welcome back. Again, we have another reference to this. Bolingbroke. All right, if I can turn my page here. Okay. Okay, again, we've got this candy deal of courtesy. Okay, this idea of what sort of sweet things are we using to describe people. Okay. Again, this idea of cousin, king comes up there again. Okay, so basically they decide on a plan to not give back the prisoners. Okay, they're going to keep the prisoners and say, hey, we'll let you go if you join our rebellion against the king. Okay, and not only the prisoners, but they're going to go to Glendower. They're going to get his support, and they're going to come against the king. And they're also going to ask York, the Archbishop of York, for his support as well, because the king had his brother killed. So again, the warring houses of Lancaster and York. So Hotspur thinks that this is definitely a noble plot. Okay, how can this plot fail? And so they decide to have this rebellion. All right, so we're done with Act number 1. So let's go on to Act number 2, Scene 1. Okay. Now we're in Rochester, in an inn yard. Okay, this is going to be a quick scene. Basically, not much happens here. I believe Shakespeare includes this scene in here as a transition scene. Okay, we've got the jump from Act 1 to Act 2, and he wants to remind you of the robbery that's going to go on. So this is kind of setting the stage sort of scene, and really doesn't have much content that we need to talk about. So we'll go ahead and jump over to Scene 2, where the actual highway robbery takes place. Okay, near Glad's Hill. Okay, the people we're talking about here is Hal, Poins, Falstaff, and everyone else that's participating in the robbery. Okay, and basically we're going to talk about the thievery and then the joke that is attached to that. So we'll go ahead and switch over to our text. We'll skip the first scene, and we will start with Scene 2. Okay, here we are. Okay, so Hal and Poins kind of set Falstaff up. They hide his horse. He can't find it. Okay, and so he has to kind of make this robbery by himself with the other men. Okay, so they take the money. It's pretty easy for them. Okay, this is the sort of thing they do. Probably not on a nightly basis, but whenever they need more money. However, they probably had to do this a lot less since they befriended Hal, who likes to pay for everything anyway. Okay, so once Falstaff and the others take the money, Hal and Poins jump out and say, "Your money, villains." Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I get voices in it, especially when I do something read by Falstaff. I'll usually try to put it into his voice, or at least what I imagine his voice is. So Hal kind of narrates how the scene goes. He says, "The thieves are all scattered and possessed with fear, so strongly they dare not meet each other. Each takes his fellow for an officer. Weren't not for laughing, I should pity him." Okay, so this shows Hal's attitude towards the joke. Okay, he almost pities them, but it's still funny to him. Okay, what we're gonna want to watch is, does there come a point when he no longer thinks that this sort of thing is funny, and does he just pity his friends? All right, so that's the robbery, and the double robbery, and then the joke. So that brings us to scene 3. Okay, and we're shifting to Warkworth Castle. This is the home of the Percys. Okay, and basically we're dealing with Hotspur and Lady Percy, his wife, Kate. Okay, so we get our first blunder of the rebellion here. We also get a scene between Hotspur and Kate, in which we ask the question, is there love in this relationship? Alright, so let's switch over to our text. Alright, so scene 3. We have the first blunder here. Okay, basically, Hotspur wrote a letter. We're not quite sure who this letter is to. I'm not sure about Shakespeare's motive for not telling us who the letter is to. We can kind of guess that it's probably written to Sir Walter Blunt, and hopefully trying to persuade him to come over to their side, to the rebellion side. We can make this inference by saying that he was willing to side with them about the prisoners. Okay, and he's kind of that middleman between the king and the Percy clan. Although we know Sir Walter does not like Thomas Percy Worcester. Okay, so the letter he receives back says that the purpose you undertake is dangerous, the friends you have named uncertain, the time itself unsorted, and your whole plot is too light for the counterpoise of so great an opposition. Okay, so this is kind of seeing the rebellion from kind of an objective position. Okay, how much do we really know about Glendower? Okay, Douglas is up for the fight, but is he really that good of an ally? I mean, Hotspur defeated him 3 times, and so is he really a good friend? Can he bring enough opposition to really put the king in position where he's threatened enough. Okay, but Hotspur is not convinced by this argument. He says he's got a good plot, good friends, full of expectation, an excellent plot, very good friends. So he's not really providing himself any real tangible evidence that his plot is a good plot. There's no tangible evidence that his friends are good. Okay, he just has expectations, and this is kind of where we see maybe Hotspur's weakness. He's super confident, but he's not real. Doesn't like to look at things objectively. All right. So he decides, hang him, let him tell the king, we are prepared. I will set forward tonight. Okay. Now we get to the scene between Lady Percy and Hotspur. You've probably seen, you should have seen two different performances of this scene. In the BBC version, we saw that this was kind of playful banter between two people who do love each other. In the Hollow Crown version, things are a little bit more heated. We can see some neglect, a lot more neglect in that version. So let's go ahead and have another opinion question here. How do you feel this scene should be portrayed? Is there still love in this scene? As let's see, let's find. Okay, do you not love me? Do you not indeed? Is there love in this relationship? Okay. Again, you can see some of the playful banter here. If it is playful, maybe it's just cruel. What carries you away? Why, my horse, my love, my horse. Okay, or is that is that playful, or is that, being cruel, saying you're stupid? It's my horse. That roan shall be my throne. I love that line. Anyway. So go ahead and pause the video, answer the question, is there love in this relationship? Is this a playful scene, or is there real hate here? Is it a relationship that is falling apart? So go ahead and pause and come back when you have written your opinion. All right, welcome back. We've got scene 4 coming here. We're back in London in the Boar's Head Tavern. This is where Hal likes to hang out with his riotous friends. Okay, here we have Hal and Poins. Later we're going to have Falstaff and the rest of the hooligans. And then even later we're going to have the sheriff show up. Okay, we've got quite a few things in this scene that are important to address. Hal feels like he's ready for anything. Okay, and we'll see why. Kind of a scene of why he feels that way. Okay, the next thing is the joke is exposed, and how does Falstaff, number one, what does he say happened, and then what happens then? Okay, and then later we find out that Hal needs to confront his father, and he practices an answer of what he's going to say to his father. at the end of which we find a very hard truth that comes out, and it's really the crux of this play, okay, the turning point. And then the sheriff arrives. So a lot here. So we're going to be diving pretty deep. All right. So let's switch over to our text. All right. Boar's Head Tavern, Eastcheap. Okay. Hal comes in with Poins, and they pull a joke on poor Francis. Okay, Francis is a servant who's been working there about 5 years now, and he's really not the sharpest tool in the shed, and Hal takes the opportunity to demonstrate this. And so the joke is that Hal, the prince, will get Francis's attention, and Poins is going to be in the other side of the room yelling for Francis, and he'll be stuck between the two. Does he stay with the Lord, or does he answer his call? And basically, the only thing Francis can answer is anon, anon, sir. So soon, and we'll see how that kind of ends up. Okay, keeps yelling Francis, anon, anon, sir, Francis, anon, sir, Francis, anon, sir. Okay, we'll get a lot of this. Okay, the joke kind of comes to an end right here. Okay, so Poins kind of asks, what is supposed to be meant by this jest? Okay, and Hal says, I am now of all humors that have showed themselves humors since the old days of good man Adam to pupil age of this present 12 o'clock at midnight. Okay, so again we have time being referred to here. So he's basically said, I've done everything that a man can do, or that a man has done ever since Adam, up to this, time at midnight. And then he asks, what time is it, Francis? And of course he gets the answer, anon, anon, sir. So Francis, and this answer of anon, anon, sir, kind of means that the time doesn't really matter. We'll get to the time. And, as a consequence of how messing around, he's ready and in the mood for anything. So that's how Hal is feeling here. Again, it's kind of that idea of contrast. I'm going to go as low as I can so that when I have to be High King, there's this huge transformation that happens. And we'll see whether you've already given us your opinion on this. We'll see what Hal's father's opinion about this is. Okay, so we have Hal making a reference to Percy of Hotspur in the form of a joke, and it's actually pretty funny. He's got Hotspur kind of nailed here, but again, at the end of the play, we'll see, does Hal have respect for Hotspur, the same sort of respect that his father has for Hotspur? We'll see. But he says, I am not yet of Percy's mind. So he's not quite, he says, I'm not the same type of guy that Hotspur is. the Hotspur of the North, that he kills some 6 or 7 dozen Scots at a breakfast, washes his hands, and says to his wife, "Fie upon this quiet life, I want work." "Oh, sweet Harry," says she, "how many hast thou killed today?" "Give my roan horse a drench," says he, and answers, "Some 14. An hour after, a trifle, a trifle." So he's making fun of Hotspur here, that he's killing Scots before breakfast, and his wife is just thinking it's the greatest thing ever to happen. Now, if we contrast that to what happened in the previous scene with them, is there really love in this relationship? Is she really doting on his kills? I think either way you went on your opinion, really that's not the case. Okay, it's either playful banter, but she's still, a little bit nervous about the relationship, or they're downright fighting, and it's getting ugly. So that's kind of Hal's opinion of Percy. Okay. Well, all of a sudden, Falstaff comes in, and his favorite thing to call Hal now is a coward, and he refers to him as a plague of all cowards. And he refers to him coward. Again, plague of all cowards. Okay, why is he a coward? Because he wasn't there when he need him. And he begins to spin his lies. Okay. He refers to them as cowards many, many times. Okay. And we'll see whether or not Hal is actually a coward, or if Falstaff is a coward. Okay, so basically, Falstaff is claiming that once they got the money, okay, they were set upon by hundreds of men, and who took the money away from them. Okay, there were so many that Hal's like, well, I hope you didn't kill anybody. And of course Falstaff ran with that, and he says, oh, well, that can't be helped. I killed 2 of them for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was 7, and it escalates from there. Down to the point where he gets to the point where he talks about, men in Kendall Green, and he also previously said that it was so dark you couldn't see the hand in front of your face, so he's, which is it? How could you tell exactly what color they were wearing when you couldn't see the hand in front of your face? And so they kind of call him out on his lies without revealing that they know exactly what happened. Okay, Hal says, these lies are like their father who begets them. Gross as a mountain, open, palpable. Okay, Falstaff said, What? Art thou mad? Art thou mad? Is not the truth the truth? And then Hal says, why? How couldst thou know these men Kendall Green when it was so dark that thou couldst not see thy hand? Okay, and Point says, what's your reason here? We're tearing apart your argument here. And Falstaff hedges and says, what, upon compulsion? Give you a reason upon compulsion? If reasons were as plentiful as blackberries, I wouldn't give no man a reason upon compulsion. Okay. So he's saying, are you threatening me? I'm not going to give in to your threats and give you a reason by compulsion, even if reasons were as plentiful as blackberries. I love Falstaff. Anyways, And finally, Hal comes out, and you can tell Falstaff is lying about something because he'll keep repeating it. And here, Hal is telling the truth. He says it once, and he says it quite quite forcefully. He says, "I'll be no longer guilty of this sin, this sanguine coward, this bed presser, this horseback breaker, this huge hill of flesh." So Falstaff is the coward. And, okay, that makes Falstaff mad, of course. Okay. Hal says, "Mark now how a plain tale shall put you down." Okay, and then he says, the two of us set out, you took the money, we took it from you, and you guys ran around being scared. So now let's hear, and wants to hear what Falstaff has to say. Okay, come now, let's hear, Jack. What trick hast thou now? Okay. Falstaff says, "By the Lord, I knew ye as well as he that made ye." Okay. "Why, thou knowest I am as valiant as Hercules, but beware instinct. The lion will not touch the true prince." And then he adds, "But by the Lord, lads, I'm glad you have the money." Okay, so basically Falstaff is changing his story and saying, I knew it was you guys all along, and I didn't know, consciously, but my instincts are so in tune that, I didn't kill you on instinct. Okay. Do we accept this explanation? Of course not. Falstaff is a liar. Okay. Okay, and Prince, okay, he's content. And they want to do a play, and the argument of the play will be Falstaff's running away, and Falstaff says, no more of that, Hal, and thou lovest me." Okay, so basically Falstaff, he's not totally amused with the joke, but he takes it pretty well at this point, and he's glad that they still have the money. All right, but one thing that a visitor comes to the tavern, and they're asking for Hal, and so Hal sends Falstaff to deal with the messenger. He comes back, and it's a messenger from his father, and there's the tale of rebels and Glendower and Douglas all combining forces against the king. And I think this kind of rattles Falstaff, and Falstaff wants to know if this is rattling his prince. Okay, again, earlier on this evening, Hal said he was ready to do everything, but one thing he hasn't done is gone to war. So Falstaff says, "Art thou not horribly afraid? Dost thy blood thrill at it?" Okay. But Hal says, "Not a whit, i'faith, I lack some of thy instinct." So he makes a joke of it, and again, I think Falstaff is kind of rattled here, and he doesn't want Hal to go into his father unprepared. But as we'll see, Falstaff doesn't really do a good job of preparing him anyway. So He wants Hal to practice an answer to his father as he's confronted with them. So we have kind of two plays. They wanted to do a play anyway, so they're gonna have fun with this. So they kind of do it in two stages. The first stage, Falstaff pretends to be the king, and Hal plays himself. But as we can see, Falstaff isn't going to play the king very well, and so they switch places. So first of all, Falstaff says, you've been hanging out with bad people, and yet there is a virtuous man who I have often noted in thy company, but I do not know his name. And Hal says, what manner of man? And it like your majesty? He says, a goodly, portly man. Again, he's talking about himself. His name is Falstaff. Harry, I see virtue in his looks. There is virtue in that Falstaff. Keep him with the rest banish. Interesting thought. Okay, so, and at that point, Hal's like, do you speak like a king? Do thou stand for me, and I'll play my father. So they switch places. And of course, Falstaff makes a funny here. He says, depose me. And really, he's making light of what is actually happening. Okay, the overthrowing of his father is actually what's on the line here, and he makes light of it, and it is actually kind of funny. Alright, so now we've got Hal playing his father and Falstaff playing Hal. So Hal says, there is a devil haunts thee in a likeness of an old fat man. A ton of man is thy companion. And then, of course, Falstaff says, who means your grace? And Hal says, that villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old white-bearded Satan. So now we're getting a little bit closer to the truth, and Hal gets extremely close to the truth here. Okay, this is the most powerful part of the play, in which it's kind of beautiful that it is a play within a play, and it's, we better just read it. Falstaff, as Hal says, no, my good lord, banish Peto, banish Bardolph, banish Poins, but sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant because, as he is, old Jack Falstaff. Banish not him thy Harry's company, banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish plump Jack, and banish all the world. Hal says, I do, I will. So, in this play, we uncover Hal's true thoughts on the matter. He knows that one day he's going to have to be king. And even with his contrast, he knows that once he's king, he can't be the person that he is now. And that will mean banishing Falstaff. And he says, I do, And I think that's for the sake of the play. But I will. That's, unfortunately for Falstaff, that's a promise that he will banish him. So the play is uninterrupted, and Falstaff feels like, well, and you can see in his face in the depictions, we know that Hal hurt him here, and I think it's those words haunt him for the rest of his life. But the play is interrupted. Bardolph comes in saying the sheriff is at the door, and Falstaff says, "Out, you rogue! Play out the play. I have much to say in behalf of that Falstaff." And he doesn't get to defend himself here. And really, he doesn't get another opportunity to really sway Hal's decision here. There's other times when they're together, but they're not talking about this. And Hal goes through some transformative things that change who he is. So Falstaff never really gets to defend himself, and we kind of know that he can't really defend against that. He doesn't have anything, the best thing's going to be for him to be banished. So we have the sheriff come in, and he questions Hal about the robbery, and they specifically ask about Falstaff, a man, as fat as butter. Okay, that's pretty fat. And Hal, says, he's not in this house. I sent him on an errand. And so he covers for Falstaff. And the sheriff kind of lets Hal know that this is a big deal. This is men who have lost 300 marks, 2 gentlemen, and Hal promises if the men were robbed, then the man will be held answerable. And the sheriff says, "Good night, my noble lord." And Hal says, "I think it is morrow, is it not?" And the sheriff says, "Indeed, my lord, I think it be 2 o'clock." Now, if we remember, our scene began with this joke about time. And really, from the very beginning when we met Hal, there was this idea that the people he hangs out with don't care about what time it is. They're always partying. They're doing what's best for themselves. And here the sheriff, in one little line, kind of tears down that entire way of thinking. He says, "Yeah, it is the morrow. What are you doing in a tavern at 2 o'clock in the morning? You should be sleeping. You should be getting ready to be in court tomorrow. Why are you in a tavern?" And again, we get that hearkening back to Anon Anon. He's gonna get to it at some point, and it kind of hits him. When am I gonna be the person that I need to be? I keep saying I'm gonna get to it, but when is that gonna happen? And so, really, the joke started out being on Francis, and Francis being, the tavern fool, the person everybody makes fun of because he's dim of wit. But at the end, it's a joke on Hal, because Hal is incredibly smart. He should be using his know-how and such to be bettering the kingdom. Okay. Well, what happens to Falstaff? Of course, he falls asleep in hiding and snoring, and it's an opportunity for them to go through his pockets and take certain items, such as a copper ring, a receipt of a bunch of things that he's bought, and we can see from the receipt that 2 gallons of sack. Okay, and sack is pretty much sherry, and this is a time in history where, well, really the first time in history where distilled alcohol becomes cheaper than wine. Okay, the water at this time period is not very safe to drink, so primarily people were drinking wine for that, but now all of a sudden distilled alcohol, which has a much higher alcohol content. Hopefully this is all new news to you guys, but it's really the rise, the first time where it's the birth of modern alcoholism. And as we can see, Falstaff is pretty much buying mostly this sherry sack and the basic necessities tacked onto that. So he's definitely an alcoholic. All right, so the pickpocketing of Falstaff happens. He's sleeping when Hal just saved his bacon. Pun intended there. And that brings us to Act 3. Okay, so that scene was a little bit of a doozy. I apologize if I kind of waxed eloquent on that one. All right, Act 3. This is the midpoint of the play, so bear with me. Scene 1. We are now in Wales, in the castle of Glendower. That's where Hotspur was headed on his throne of Arone. And we get our first interaction between the rebels here. Okay, we have Hotspur, Owen Glendower, the revolted Mortimer. Lady Percy shows up too. Alright, so the things we're going to cover, the lies of Glendower. We'll see that he's an ego to kind of rival Hotspur. Can these rebels share? It's a big question. And we have some more banter between the Percys, that is Hotspur and his wife. Alright, so let's switch back over to the text. Alright, so basically Owen Glendower talks about his birth and that all sorts of signs in the heavens accompanied his birth, and he really thinks of himself as a mystical leader, and he is he's gonna be the leader because all these signs, and he can summon the devil and things like that. Okay, and so he says, he can call spirits from the deep, and says, Hotspur has his own little witticism here. Why, so can I, or so can any man, but will they come when you do call them? Okay, so he's dissing Glendower in his own house, and we can really see that there's contention between those. Hotspur's a very honest person, Okay, he doesn't like that Glendower is making up all these stories. Okay, he says he can command the devil, and Hotspur says, let me teach you. Shame the devil by telling the truth. Tell truth and shame the devil. Okay, so he's not buying any of the lies that Glendower is laying down. Okay, so then it shifts to, okay, so when we take over the kingdom, how are we going to share the kingdom? Okay, so they're looking at the map, and it doesn't look fair to Hotspur. Okay, and he says, you're cutting me off from, my best land over here, and so let's either change the lines or let's move the river. Okay, and he says, I'll have the river changed, and a little change will do it. And Glendower says, I'll not have it altered. And will you not? And Glendower says, no, nor you shall not. Who shall say me nay? That will I. Let me not understand you then. Speak it in Welsh. So here's, kind of a quick little verbal fight between them, saying, I'm not going to have it altered, and you're going to say, I can't alter it. And so if you're going to say that, say it in Welsh, because you're not really an Englishman. And so that's kind of the final thing. And Glendower goes on to say, I can speak English as well as you. In fact, I can probably speak it better because I'm a poet. But, of course, finally Glendower says, well, okay, we'll go ahead and alter it. And then Hotspur denies it and says, I don't care. I'll give thrice so much land to any well-deserving friend, but in a way of bargaining, mark me, I'll cavil on the 9th part of a hair. So basically what he's saying there is, I would give land to a well-deserving friend. It would be a gift. But you're not my friend, and I will bargain to the 9th part of a hair with a friend, or with someone who's not my friend. So, can these people really rule a kingdom? Not if they can't share. Okay, and we'll be getting back to sharing. Shakespeare doesn't leave any loose ends. He wraps everything up in a nice little bow. So we'll be coming back to sharing towards the end of the play. Alright, I think that might be it. Other than when we get to the end of the scene here, we have more banter, or perhaps it's another fight between Hotspur and his wife. So again, this might be more evidence which you can base your opinion on. But let's go ahead and make our way to scene 2 of Act 3. Alright, so scene 2, we're back in London in the palace. And basically we've got the king, Henry IV, and his son, Hal. They're going to have it out. And we will see what is going to be said about his vulgar company. Is Hal like Richard II? That's what we're going to find out. And Hal ends up taking an oath to his father. Okay. Okay, so Henry starts out and says, for some displeasing service I have done, God is punishing him with revengeance and a scourge upon him. Okay, to punish his mistreatings. Okay, so this, what he's talking about is he took the throne. Okay, and he's thinking, maybe it's because I took the throne from Richard II that I was punished with you. So this maybe comes back to, is Henry IV a good father? Okay. Or is this tough love? Okay. Again, he's got a son that's indulging in barren pleasure, rude society. Okay. Should this great blood, is this the level of thy princely heart? Are you taking the royal blood that I give you, and you're doing things with it that you shouldn't be? Okay. So Hal says that he would like to quit all offenses with as clear an excuse as he can say. He says there's rumors flying around about me. You've doubtlessly heard them. Yet such extenuation let me beg, as in reproof of these many tales devised, which oft the ear of greatness needs must hear, by smiling pickthanks and base newsmongers. I may for some things true, wherein my youth hath faulty wandered and irregular, find pardon on my true submission. So basically what he's saying here is there's a bunch of people saying rumors about me, but they're a little bit true. Okay, he says he has wandered and become irregular, but he's here to find pardon through true submission. Okay, now is this really going to satisfy the king? Okay, it's not. Okay, and so if we look at it from an argumentative stance, he gives excuses, but he doesn't really give evidence for the king to accept, his father to accept his warrants. So he just says there's rumors. Again, no evidence that there actually are rumors, and not really what they are. And he does say, I am a little irregular and I'm wandering. Okay, but when we get to the king's response, he provides plenty of evidence. Okay, first and foremost, thy place in council thou hast lost, thou hast rudely lost, which thy younger brother has supplied, and you've become almost alien to the hearts of all the courts and princes of my blood. So basically, he's not fulfilling his princely duties. He's supposed to be in court, learning how to be the king of this country. Okay, and being in a good example for his brothers, because his brothers are going to be important people in court as well, and they need guidance. And the king can't really be there for everyone. So, that's one of the questions, or one of the answers we can give to the question: is he a good father? And the answer is he doesn't really have time to be a good father. Being a king almost makes you not a good father, because you can't spend that quality time with his children. And he thinks Hal, if he could be there and be a big brother, then he would help the situation out so much more. But instead, he's hanging out with vulgar company. Okay. And specifically, he's being seen. And when he compares himself at the same age. So when Henry the Fourth was a young man, okay, he had no mark or likelihood. So people didn't really know who he was. Okay, it says, by being seldom seen, I could not stir, but like a comet I was wondered at, that men would tell their children, this is he. Others would say, which is Bolingbroke? That I did pluck allegiances from men's hearts, loud shouts and salutations from their mouths, even in the presence of the crowned king. So he's saying, when I was young, I made myself scarce. People wondered at me. They're like, who is this Bolingbroke? And when he was seen, he was like a comet. So again, we've got this kind of contrast, but this is very much different. Hal saying, I'm making this contrast because I am being bad, and everybody can see me being bad, and then I'm going to be good, and everybody's going to see that difference. But the problem is, people are making their initial impressions, and can Hal overcome that initial impression? Whereas Henry the Fourth, he was seldom seen. He was like a comet. When he did step into his role as becoming someone who would be king, they marveled at him. Oh, there he is. He came out of exile to get rid of Richard II, who was a terrible king, and he plucked allegiance out of their hearts, even in the presence of the king. Okay, and he talks about what kind of king Richard was. Okay, and if we remember from our pre-reading, we know what kind of king he was. Okay, the skipping king. Okay, he was the king that was, skipping around. He ambled up and down with shallow jests. Now, when we hear shallow jests, we should think of Falstaff, because he is the king of shallow jests. Did he get it from Richard? Probably not, but kind of the same. Okay, and we see Hal participating in shallow jests. Okay, and rash, braven wits, soon kindled and soon burnt, carded his state, mingled his royal with capering fools. So I like this metaphor of being soon kindled and then soon burnt. So he burned out really fast, and we saw that with how he treated Henry IV in his exiling him. Okay, switching sides and opinions all the time. Soon kindled and soon burnt, and keeping fools around him. Okay, to laugh at jibing boys and stand the push of every beardless vain comparative. Okay. He compares him to a cuckoo in June. He was but a cuckoo in June, heard but not regarded, seen but with such eyes as sick and blunted with community, afforded no extraordinary gaze. And here's the clincher: sun-like majesty. If we remember back to Hal's soliloquy, he wanted to be like the sun, shining. But here, Henry the Fourth saying, it's sun-like majesty just doesn't work. You have to work at it. You can't be like a cuckoo. You know, people hear a cuckoo, but they don't really regard a cuckoo. They just say, oh, it's just a cuckoo. Okay, when it shines seldom in admiring eyes. Okay, so again, the king knows exactly what words to use with Harry here, and I think, you know, the sun-like majesty really hits him. Okay, and Hal's response. Okay. I shall hereafter, my thrice gracious lord, be more myself. Now, this might make sense to Hal, but because right now he envisions himself as not being himself. He envisions himself as being the good king, and he's kind of putting on a play right here. He's setting his foil so that he has that comparison. But this answer is not very convincing to someone who just sees him as Richard, basically, as another Richard. Okay, Richard was just being himself too. So this isn't a very good statement, and the king doesn't like it very much. And now he's the king is comparing Hotspur to how the king was when he was taking over from Richard. Okay, even as I was then, is Percy now. Okay, Percy is trying to take the kingdom. Okay, thrice hath this Hotspur, Mars in swaddling clothing and clothes, this infant warrior, in his enterprises, discomforted the great Douglas, taking him once, engaged him, and made a friend of him. Okay, so these are the merits of Hotspur. He has defeated the mighty Douglas, and now he's made him his friend. He can make his enemies his friends. Okay, and he also, you know, just names all the people that are with him. Okay, but then the king says, but why, but wherefore do I tell these news to thee? Why, Harry, do I tell thee of my foes, which art my nearest and dearest enemy? Okay. And what he's asking is, these foes, as great as they are, they're far away from me. Okay, but which is the enemy that is the closest to me? And that enemy is Hal. Hal is the next in line. He is Henry IV's closest enemy. And, that's how he sees it. Okay? And he flat out asked to fight against me under Percy's pay. Okay, to dog his heels in courtesy at his frowns, to show how much thou art degenerate. So he's saying, are you fighting against me under Percy's pay? Okay, do you dog his heels? Do you curtsy at his frowns? Okay, are you his? Did he make you degenerate? Are you showing that you are degenerate because of his pay? Are you Percy's? And Hal says, do not think so. You shall not find it so. So finally, he's denying in a way that is comforting to his father. Okay, I will now be more myself wasn't comforting. Now this is starting to be comforting to the king. Okay. For the time will come that I will make this northern youth exchange his glorious deeds for my indignities. So Hal is making that oath that I'm going to make Hotspur trade places with me. Okay. And this is, in the beginning, what the king wanted, right? He wanted them to be switched. Well, Hal is saying, I'm going to switch places with him. I am going to be the glorious one. And Hotspur is going to take over my indignities. Okay? And he says, I will die 100,000 deaths ere I break the smallest parcel of this vow. So he is committed. He will die 100,000 deaths and still not break it. Okay. The king. This impressed his father. Okay. So even if we think that the king is incapable of being a good father, okay, I think he shows good quality here because, he could just say, oh, you're just saying this to get out of trouble, okay, but he gives Hal this chance, and he believes him. He says, 100,000 rebels die in this. Thou shalt have charge and sovereign trust herein. Okay, so if we define being a good father as, giving over that trust to his son, which, eventually he's going to have to do because he's the next in line, Henry IV steps up here. He reproves with sharpness and then comes back with trust. Okay, and this is, again, if we remember back to Heinlein's argument, I think this is where Heinlein kind of fell short. That reproving with sharpness was definitely there, but that increase of trust and sovereignty is very much missing from his argument. So, but it's here in Shakespeare. Who knew? All right, so that kind of ends that kind of great speech, and we move on to scene 3. Okay, so scene 3, again, I apologize that this lecture is getting a little bit long, but again, there's really no easy way to do this. We don't have time in class, and we just got to power through it. Okay, we're back at the Boar's Head Tavern. Okay, Falstaff and the rest of the crew and Hal are our main characters here. Okay, Falstaff accuses the prince of being a jack, which is kind of funny because that's basically a jack calling another person a jack. Okay, and then we have this idea of the double labor, and we'll get to that. Okay, so let's back to our text. Okay. Falstaff is very funny, but he can be cruel. Okay, he's got a good friend of his, Bardolph, which, I think I certainly have a tender spot for him, as he fulfills a important role in kind of not necessarily this play, but the whole storyline of Henry V. How he kind of has a role in which is kind of pitiful, and we really feel for him. But anyways, it's kind of digressing. But Falstaff, he's very funny, very witty, but he can also be quite harsh himself and rude. Okay, Bardolph says, you're so fat, you're without compass. Can't even be, nothing can go around you. Okay, you're unreasonable, and it's not just his weight, but it's also his life that's out of compass. And Falstaff says, do thou amend thy face, and I'll amend my life. So fix your face, and I'll fix my life. So that's kind of harsh. Okay. Basically, we have a scene here where Falstaff is accusing the hostess of having thieves in her in her tavern. It's true, but Falstaff is the thief. But and he says all the things that have been stolen from him. Okay, a signet ring of his father's. Okay, I believe he says it's gold, but it's actually made of copper. The prince has told everybody that it's copper, and the hostess says this. I've heard the prince tell him, I know not how oft the ring was copper. Okay, and at that, Falstaff says, how? The prince is a jack, a sneak cups blood, and he were here, I would cudgel him like a dog, if he would say so. So basically, he says, the prince is a no-good liar, okay, and if he was here and he called my ring copper, I would kill him. Okay, I'd run him through. Well, the prince happens to enter, as that usually happens. It's called plot. And so the hostess is quick to say, hey, Hal, Falstaff said he would cudgel you. Okay, but first we have kind of banter between the hostess and Falstaff. And here the hostess kind of gets the best of Falstaff because she, kind of doesn't know how to argue herself, and just kind of keeps asking Falstaff questions, and it kind of gets him into kind of walking himself into trouble. So he calls her a beast and says, well, what beast? And says, what beast? Why, an otter. And everybody's like, why an otter? And she's neither fish nor flesh, a man knows not where to have her. Well, Falstaff, even when flustered, is a little bit funny. Okay, another thing that Falstaff accuses Hal is that he owes him money. Okay, £1,000. And when the hostess brings that up, he says, the prince says, do I owe you £1,000? And Falstaff's answer is, £1,000? Ha! 1,000,000! Thy love is worth 1,000,000. Thou owest me thy love. So he's dodged the question again. Okay. Okay, the prince comes out and says, yes, I did say it's copper. It's copper. And you're going to cudgel me? And Falstaff says, why, Hal? Thou knowest thou art but man, I dare. But thou art prince. I fear thee as I fear the roaring lion's whelp. So basically he says, if you were a normal man, I would run you through, but you're a prince. So I fear you like I do a lion cub. And he says, well, why not as the lion? Okay, and this is very important because Falstaff says, the king is to be feared as the lion. Dost thou think I fear thee as I fear thy father? So this is a very important point. Okay. Falstaff fears the king because what does the king do? He hangs thieves. Okay, he runs the kingdom in a way that is lawful and orderly. Now, we come back to that question, will Hal hang a thief when he is king? And Falstaff has that hope that he won't have to fear the next king as a lion, that he can fear him as, this lion cub or the lion's whelp. And that Hal won't be a strong king, and he'll let him get away with his things. So that's why he answers that way. Okay, if we look what's next. Okay, so Hal tells the story of how Falstaff's things went missing. Falstaff says, you confess then, you picked my pocket. And Hal says, it appears so by the story. So we have in this play a concept of two initiations. So the first initiation is that of thieves. So Hal has been hanging out for thieves for a while. He went out and he stole the thieves' money, and that was kind of his first initiation into thievery. Okay, and now he's just had kind of the second initiation where he's been given sovereign charge over defeating the rebels. And defeating the rebels will be his second initiation. So we see that Hal is maybe feeling a little bit guilty about his first initiation because now he's had his second one. He's no longer going to try to be a contrast. He's going to try to be a little bit more like how his father was. Okay, seldom seen but wondered at, like a comet. Okay. Okay, but Hal is a little bit reluctant here, and he wants to give Falstaff every opportunity to amend his life. So he gave the money back to the sheriff. Okay, and oh my sweet beef, I still must be good angel to thee. The money is paid back again. So he made it right. Falstaff doesn't have to go down for the robbery. But Falstaff is kind of saddened by this because he wants the money. Oh, I do not like the paying back. 'Tis a double labor. Okay, so this idea of we went through all that to steal the money, and then you went through all that to give back the money. That's a double labor. We did two very difficult things and accomplished nothing. All right. So that is Act 3. So we are now on Act 4. we're getting there. All right, scene 1. Okay, now we're in the camps. So specifically the rebel camp. And this all occurs near Shrewsbury. So that's where the battle's going to take place. In this camp, we've got Hotspur, Worcester, and Douglas. Okay, remember Worcester is the uncle to Hotspur, and Douglas is the Scot. Okay, we have in this more trouble for the rebels. Okay, a maim. And we'll see how that goes down. Okay, we get to scene 1. Okay, so basically, Hotspur gets news that his father is grievous sick. Okay, messenger shows up. His father's not gonna make it to the battle. Okay, that's bad because he's not bringing any men. Okay. Worcester says, your father's sickness is a maim to us. Hotspur says, a perilous gash, a very limb lopped off, and yet, in faith, it is not. His presence seems more than we shall find it. Okay. So again, we have this idea of contrast coming up. So at first, Hotspur thinks that his father showing up is going to be really bad, and in fact it is really bad because they need all the men they can get. However, he chooses to see it in terms of contrast. Okay, I rather of his absence make this use. It lends a luster, again there's that idea of something shiny, and more great opinion, a larger dare to our great enterprise, if we without his help can make ahead to push against the kingdom. With his help we shall o'erturn it topsy-turvy down, yet all goes well, yet our joints are whole. So Hotspur is saying, no, this isn't a maim to us. This isn't a perilous gash. We'll use this as a contrast. We'll show that we can defeat the king with so few men that when we have our entire force, we can turn the whole kingdom upside down on its head. Now, we see that this is more like Hal's logic instead of Hotspur's. So at the end of his discussion with his father, the king, Hal was acting more like Hotspur. Now Hotspur's kind of showing some attributes that Hal previously shown. So we can kind of see that Hal's promise to make the role switch is actually coming true. And again, Shakespeare leaves no loose ends here. So he's making sure that everything makes sense, and this switch is happening right before our eyes. So things aren't going well for the rebels, but Hotspur is kind of blinding himself to the dangers. All right, so that's scene 1. That was a quick one. Okay, scene 2. Now we're on a public road near Coventry. Okay, and now the important people are Falstaff and Hal. Okay, and we will see the misuse of the king's press. Okay, and basically a press is the warrant of conscription. So basically what Hal gave Falstaff was this warrant, this press, to go in to and get people to fight for the king. So conscription, you know, they're going to get paid for for the work, but it's kind of like a draft. They have to do it. And so we'll see how Falstaff handles this conscription. In the next scene. Okay, so Falstaff is marching down the road, and he talks about what he has done. Okay, he's kind of ashamed of his soldiers. Okay, I have misused the king's press damnably. I have got in exchange of 150 soldiers, 300 and odd pounds. So basically what he did is he went and he got soldiers, okay, and then he traded those soldiers for 300 pounds. So not good. And the men that he now has are pretty much people from prison. Okay, young sons, younger brothers, the insane, pretty much everybody you don't want in your army. So Hal comes out and is looking over his troops, that Falstaff, okay. Prince isn't impressed. I've never seen such pitiful rascals. Okay. Falstaff denies that he has anything to do with them being beggarly. Okay. Faith for their poverty, I know not where they had that. As for their bareness, I'm sure they never learned that from me. Okay, so he's basically saying, they didn't get their attributes from me because I'm large, and they didn't learn how to be bare from me. All right, so we see that Hal is really trying to help Falstaff, be now a good person, but Falstaff isn't helping Falstaff. Alright, we're on to the next scene. Scene 3. Okay, now we're back in the rebel camp. Again, near the battlefield at Shrewsbury. Okay, we've got Hotspur, Worcester, and Sir Walter Blunt. Okay, if we remember back, the night that possibly Hotspur contacted, and also, spoke quite highly of him, but we can see that he's loyal to the king. Okay, and basically he calls to know the rebels' grievances. All right, so scene 3. We've got Sir Walter Blunt coming in. Okay, gracious offers from the king. And what does Hotspur say about gracious tidings from the king? The king is kind, and well we know the king. He knows what time to promise, when to pay. So basically, he's saying that the king knows that he's in trouble, so now he's coming to us with great offerings, and we know we can beat him. Okay. Okay, so Sir Walter Blunt wants to know why are you guys rebelling? The king needs to know your grievances, so maybe we can come to a peaceful conclusion to this. And Hotspur says that I wish you were of our determination, but basically what Hotspur says is kind of what we talked about in the pre-reading, that when Henry IV came back from exile, he said that he was only going to take his dukedom back, but instead he took the throne, and that's why they're grieved. Okay, this is our head of safety and withdrawal to pry into his title, which we find too indirect for long continuance. So, again, it's this idea of the cousin king, and that he shouldn't be king because Richard named Mortimer the next in line. Okay, but Sir Walter Blunt, he's been down this road before. He knows all these grievances. And he says, shall I return this answer to the king? As a way of saying, you and I both know that this reason isn't valid, and that what's really going on here is that your uncle wants you to take the throne. Okay, it's kind of implied here. And he says, no, Sir Walter will withdraw a while. So it's kind of unfortunate as we get to the next scene that Hotspur doesn't actually take his own grievances to the king, because the conflict could have been avoided if that happened. Okay. Our next scene takes us away. Okay, we're not going to dive into it. We can talk about it just here. Basically, we're in York now, the Archbishop's palace, and we're dealing with the Archbishop. Again, he was supposed to be one of these rebels sending support. However, the Archbishop knows that the rebels can't win. They're outnumbered. He knows about his father not coming. And he also knows that Owen Gwendower's not going to come. Could that be because Percy offended him? Could be. Okay, or he just knows that now's not the time to fight the king. Okay, so there's going to be no aid from York either. So it's basically Hotspur and his army, and Douglas and his army against all the forces of the king. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's begin Act 5. Okay, final act. We're coming down the home stretch. Let's set the scene for scene 1. Okay, now we're near, we're at the King's Camp near Shrewsbury. Again, we've got Henry IV, Hal, Falstaff, and Worcester. Again, Hotspur doesn't come to the negotiations, and some pain could have been avoided. Okay. The lies of Worcester we're going to talk about. Also single combat, and to owe God a death, and honor his heir. Okay. All right. Let's switch back over to the text. Let's skip York. We're getting close. Okay, scene 5. Again, Worcester and Vernon are the ones that come before the king to lay their grievances. Okay, here, my liege. For mine own part, I could be well content to entertain the lag end of my life with quiet hours, for I do protest, I have not sought this day of dislike. Okay, Worcester was the one that started this, and now he's saying, okay, if it were just up to me, I'd be content, sitting in my castle, whiling around the quiet hours, not making a protest, and that he didn't seek this day of attacking the king. Okay, king's not taken by this lie. He says, "You have not sought it. How comes it then?" Okay, and here Falstaff has his one say in the matters of state, and he says, "Rebellion lay in his way, and he found it." So he didn't seek it. It was just a happy little accident. Okay, and Hal doesn't like Falstaff jumping into matters of state, so he shushes him. Okay, but they Hal says that he wants to relay a message to Hotspur. Okay, he says, "Tell your nephew, the Prince of Wales, doth join in all the world in the praise of Henry Percy." So he starts off by saying, "Hey, I want to praise Hotspur for what he's done for the kingdom." Okay, he's been valiant in fighting the Scots, and he admits his fault. For my part, I may speak to myself shame. I have a truant been to chivalry. Okay, and will, to save blood on either side, try fortune with him in a single combat. So instead of armies attacking, why don't we just have the Harrys battle it out, mano y mano, and the winner, pretty much gets the kingdom. Okay, so that's Hal's idea, and it's a valiant one. Okay, but of course, Worcester leaves without saying anything. Okay, now Hal and Falstaff are left alone on stage, and Falstaff says, "Hal, if thou see me down in the battle and bestride me, so 'tis a point of friendship." Okay, so basically he's saying, if you see me down, will you come and save me because of our friendship? Okay, again, this idea, will Hal play favorites? Will he essentially favor Hotspur, or not favor Falstaff over winning the battle? Okay, nothing but Colossus can do thee that friendship. Say thy prayers and farewell. Okay, so he's basically saying, I can't do that for you. Falstaff says, "I would, and 'twere bedtime, Hal, and all well." Okay, so Falstaff wishes that there wasn't a battle, that they could go back to the way it was. And again, we have this idea of time, bedtime. What time is that? It's basically whenever Falstaff has eaten and consumed enough alcohol that he passes out. Okay, that's bedtime. Okay. Prince answers simply, "Why, thou owest God a death." Okay, so he's basically saying that's done with. Now it's time. We have to deal with death, and everyone owes God a death. Everyone will die at some time. And Falstaff says, "'Tis not due yet. I would be loath to pay him before his day." Okay, no one wants to die early, and he's certainly not going to pay that debt willingly. Okay. And again, we have a catechism by Falstaff here. Okay, he's talking to himself, and he's trying to define what honor is. This might be something you want to look into if you want to write a paper on the humanistic characteristic of honor. Okay, he says, honor pricks me on. Yea, but how if honor prick me off when I come on? How then? Can honor set a leg? No. Or an arm? No. Or take away the grief of a wound? No. Honor hath no skill in surgery. Then, no. What is honor? A word. What is that word honor? What is that honor? Air. A trim reckoning. Who hath it? He who died a Wednesday. Doth he feel it? No. Doth he hear it? No. 'Tis insensible then, yea, to the dead. But will it not live with the living? No. Why? Detraction will not suffer it. Therefore I'll have none of it. Honor is a mere scutcheon. And so ends my catechism. Okay, so let's kind of dissect this argument. Okay, he says that honor pricks him on. So honor is the jab that moves him forward in this battle. Okay, is that the case? No, I would say honor is not what motivates Falstaff. I would say he's there because it was his way of getting that 300 pounds. Okay, that's why he's here. Okay. And he says that honor might prick him off. So honor might get him killed. Okay, when it comes on. Okay. And he goes through and he lists some things that honor can't do. Okay. Can honor set a leg? No. Or an arm? No. Can it take away grief or the pain of a wound? No. Okay. Honor isn't something that can heal your wounds. It's got no skill in surgery. Okay. So, what is honor? Honor, he says, is a mere word. Okay. It's air. Okay. And he asks who has honor, and basically the only people he says that can have honor are people that died. Okay, do they feel it? No, because they're already dead. Do they hear it? No, because they're insensible when they're dead. Okay. And then he asks, can you have it while you're when you're alive? Okay, no, why not? Because detraction will not suffer it. So, again, there's this idea that you have to be dead in order to receive the fullness of honor. And again, this is something that I think Heinlein would agree with. You know, this duty kind of robs you of, those inalienable rights. Okay, and basically Falstaff is saying, I want my right to life, but if I have honor, I'm gonna die. Okay, and therefore he's gonna have none of it. Okay, and a scutcheon. Okay, what a scutcheon is it's a flag or a symbol that you put over a coffin. Okay, we've all seen images of bodies coming back from war. They've got the American flag or the British flag or whatever flag is from how they died for. He's saying honor is that emblem that's placed over the coffin. And you can't have it when you're living, and it's just something we drape over the dead to make us feel better about their death and to symbolize what they died for. All right, so that's his idea of honor. Is he right? Okay, maybe to a certain degree he's right. Can we truly have honor while still being alive? Okay, again, we've got a couple of texts that maybe suggest that that's not the case. All right, so let's move on to scene 2. Oh, wrong way here. All right, so scene 2. We are near the rebel camp again. Okay, we've got Worcester, Vernon, and Hotspur as our main characters here. Okay, no forgiveness. And then we have Worcester's final lie. And the idea of single combat again. Okay, and then enamored on Hal's follies. We see Vernon kind of go through a transformation, and we can maybe compare that to what Hal's father said Hal should look like. Okay, so scene 3, or sorry, scene 2. Earl of Worcester comes back, and he says, "We are all undone. Okay, there's no mercy in the king." Or actually, hold on, let's back up a little bit. They're riding towards the camp, and Worcester is talking to Vernon, and he says, "My nephew's trespasses will be forgot. In hath he excuse of youth, and heat of blood, and an adoption, a name of privilege, a harebrained Hotspur governed by a spleen. All his offenses live upon my head and his father's." So basically what Worcester is telling Vernon is that, you know what, we're undone. And you know what, when it comes down to it, Hotspur is going to get off scot-free because he's young. Okay, he's passionate, and he's also an heir to a dukedom. So all of this is going to be placed on my head and of Henry Percy's head. So we're doomed. Okay. So here's the lie that Worcester decides to tell. Okay, let not Harry know of the king's terms, right? Don't let him know that the king is willing to take us back if we just place down our arms. Okay, even if we do that, he's gonna have us killed. But if Hotspur knows that there is mercy, then he'll be tempted to take it. Okay. Vernon says, "Deliver what you will, I'll say it is so." So Vernon goes along with this lie. Okay, and we'll see that it doesn't turn out well for Vernon. Okay. So Worcester says there is no seeming mercy in the king. And Hotspur says, "Did you beg any? God forbid." So basically Hotspur saying, you didn't beg for mercy, did you? Because, we need to show them that we're tough. I think Hotspur still thinks he can win this fight. He seems to be the only one, though. So the Worcester says, The Prince of Wales stepped forth before the king, and nephew challenge you to single fight. So he's trying to use this as fuel for Hotspur. Maybe get his blood boiling a little bit. Okay. And Hotspur says, "Oh, would that the quarrel lay upon our heads, and that no man might draw a short breath today, but I and Harry Monmouth." So basically, Hotspur wants that all this to lay on single combat as well, and that's where the offer is. But Worcester is lying to him and isn't saying that Harry's willing to do this. Okay, so Hotspur thinks Hal is a coward, and that it doesn't, the offer isn't there to settle this between them. Okay, but Vernon, although he's going along with the lie, not saying there was mercy in the king, Vernon was impressed by Hal. He says, okay, Hal gave you all the duties of a man. Okay, he used a princely tongue, and which became like him a prince indeed. England never owe so sweet a hope. Okay, we have this word "sweet" again, but it's changed. Okay, it's now hopeful instead of let's see what we can get from the prince. Okay, and Hotspur thinks that that Vernon has become enamored on his follies, and we'll see that Hal is stronger than what they give him credit. All right, so now we're ready to have our final battle. Let's go ahead and set the stage for scene 4. That should say scene 3. I apologize for that. We are now in Shrewsbury proper, ready for the battle. Okay. We've got a lot of characters in this scene because a lot of people have to, come to their final place. Okay, Sir Walter Blunt, the King, Hal, Falstaff, Douglas, Hotspur, and John Lancaster. So this is John, the brother of Hal, and the prince that has had to pick up most of Hal's duties. And we'll see how that turns out for him. Okay, here's a few things we'll talk about. Here's honor for you. Falstaff gives some evidence for his catechism. Okay. Also, lend me your sword happens. Also a redeemed opinion. Okay, then we've got 2 stars, keep not their motion in one sphere. Okay, only one Harry is going to walk out of the woods. Okay, and then we'll talk about counterfeiting and who ends up being the better counterfeit. And then, is Falstaff going to grow great? And what does that mean for him? Alright, so we're getting close here. Getting close. Alright, so scene 3. Okay, we're in the battle. So basically, Douglas, the Scot, is looking for the king. He wants to be the one that takes down the king. He finds Sir Walter Blunt, who is wearing the king's clothing. Okay, and when we talk about counterfeit, this is kind of a layer of that. So Sir Walter Blunt is a counterfeit king, and he's doing this to protect the king. and this ends up being an honorable deed. Okay, so Earl of Douglas, the Scot, fights Sir Walter Blunt, kills him, thinking it's the king. Hotspur shows up. Douglas says, I killed the king. We've all's won. And Hotspur knows the face of Sir Walter Blunt. Okay. And and Hotspur says, there's going to be lots of people dressed up as the king. And Sir Douglas says, okay, if I have to kill him, all his coats first, then I'll murder all his wardrobe piece by piece. Okay. Okay, so Falstaff comes in, stumbles upon the body of Sir Walter Blunt, and he says, there's honor for you. Okay, there's an honorable man. Look at him, he's dead. Okay, so there's his evidence that honor is just a word, and it can only be obtained by dead people. Alright, so he led his ragamuffins, his soldiers, into battle, and they're pretty much dead. Okay, they're peppered. Okay, there's not 3 of my 150 still alive. That's on you, Falstaff. Okay, Henry wanders in. He's lost his sword. He sees Falstaff and says, lend me thy sword. I pray thee, lend me thy sword. Okay. Falstaff tells some lies. He says, I have paid Percy. I made him sure. Okay, that means I killed him. He's for sure dead. Okay. But Hal knows that's not true. He says, I pray thee, lend me thy sword. He says, nay. Before God, Hal, Percy be alive. Okay, he's going to need a sword. But take my pistol. So, this, if thou wilt, okay, pistol's going to be his crossbow. Okay, and he says, is it in the case? He pulls out the crossbow case, and what's in there but that which will sack a city. Okay, it's a bottle of sherry. So he has joked during battle. Hal doesn't think it's funny. Okay, you jest now. I'm dally. Okay, so Falstaff runs away. Okay, so now we get to scene 4. That was before. I think I didn't count this as a different scene. Just make sure. 5, yeah. I somehow skipped scene 3, and this is at the end. Yeah, so we'll just continue. Basically, same people running around. Okay, same place. All right, so Sir the King is confronted by Douglas the Scot. Okay, he finally found one that's not the counterfeit. Okay, and they fight. He fights the king, and Hal has to come in and save his father. Okay, and the king says, stay, breathe a while, thou hast redeemed my lost opinion, and show thou makest some tender of my life in this fair rescue thou hast brought me. Okay. So the king's saying, you've redeemed yourself here. I gave you this responsibility. You saved my life, and I no longer think that you wanted me dead. Okay, and Hal says, "Oh God, that they did me too much injury that ever said I hearkened for your death." So here's an instance where the rumors were actually worse than they were. The king thought that Hal just wanted him to be dead so he could be king, but he says that's not the case. All right, so now we get Hal versus Hotspur. Okay, this is the fight between two Harrys. Okay, so Hal sees a very valiant rebel of name. I am the Prince of Wales, and think not Percy to share in my glory any more. No two stars keep their motion in one sphere, nor can England brook a double reign of Harry Percy and the Prince of Wales. So Hal is saying, okay, there's too many Henrys in this play. We're gonna have to whittle them down. England can't have two kings. They can't have a rebel and the true heir. So one of us is going to walk out of here a victor. Okay. Nor shall it, Harry, for what the hour is come to end one of us, and would to God thy name in arms were now as great as mine. So again, Hotspur doesn't think that Hal is as good as he is. We'll see. Okay, they fight. Falstaff comes in and he's cheering on Falstaff, or cheering on Hal, and Hal does it. He kills Percy. Okay, "Oh Harry, thou hast robbed me of my youth." Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it, and I think this is where Hal and Hotspur really trade places. Okay, Hal was always viewed as, the young, rebellious person, and Hotspur was the mature man, Mars in swaddling clothing, who went out and defeated so many people. Now here's Hotspur saying, you robbed me of my youth. Okay, so the switch has taken place. Okay. And Hal has nothing but respect for Hotspur when he dies. Okay. "When this body did contain a spirit, a kingdom for it was too small a bound." Okay. Hotspur had enormous potential. But unfortunately, he had an uncle who whispered in his ear, incited him to rebellion, and lied to him. So now he's dead. Hal wanted to trade honor for indignities. However, when he sees Hotspur dead on the ground, okay, he wants Hotspur's faults kind of washed away. Okay, "Thy ignominy sleep with thee in the grave, but not remembered in thy epitaph." Okay, so he wants Hotspur to be remembered for the good things he did, and not for this rebellion. Okay, but now Hal sees Falstaff on the ground, pretending to be dead. The fight got a little too close to him, so he is pretending to be dead. Okay, what old acquaintance? Okay, "Could not all this flesh keep in a little life?" Okay. Now that Hal sees him dead, he wants to give him any honor that he can. Okay, he must be sweet to his Jack Falstaff until the end. And really, Falstaff should have died, in this battle if he was truly fighting. He should have died, and he should have obtained honor. And emboweled will I see thee by and by, till then in blood by noble Percy lie. So Falstaff would be given a tomb, okay, and be placed in high regard, as he just put Percy. Now, of course, Falstaff is faking. So Hal leaves, and Falstaff rises up and says, "Embowed? If thou embow me today, I'll give you leave to powder me and eat me tomorrow." So basically, he doesn't want to be gutted like something to be eaten. And, if he allows himself to be emboweled, he'll give you salt to eat him tomorrow. Okay? And we come back to this idea of counterfeit. Okay, we've got counterfeit kings running around. And now Falstaff is picking up that idea of counterfeit. Okay, so he's pretending to be dead, but then he decides, you know what? Being dead is more of a counterfeit than pretending to be dead. Because if you're dead, then you're a counterfeit of life. And he's saying, well, if Hotspur is laying on the ground, maybe he proves to be the better counterfeit than me. So I better make sure that he's dead and make him true. And you know what? I'm going to swear that I killed him. Okay. And he looks around. Nothing confutes me but eyes, and nobody sees me. So he takes advantage of the opportunity, gives Hotspur's body an extra wound, defiles the dead, and he is going to swear that Hotspur jumped up and he killed him to get the glory and the honor that he said could only be obtained through death. Now, he's gaining honor through the death of Hotspur. So he carries him on his back. Now, Hal has been talking with his brother, John Lancaster, and he told him the story of Falstaff being dead and Percy being dead. And John sees Falstaff, and he says, "Did you not tell me this fat man was dead?" Okay. And Falstaff says, "I am not a double man. Okay, I am Jack. Here's Percy. If your father will do me honor, so if not, let him kill the next Percy himself." Well, obviously we know that Falstaff didn't kill Percy, but Hal says, "Why, Percy, I killed myself, and I saw thee dead." And Falstaff says, "Didst thou? Lord, Lord, how this world is given to lying." Okay, Falstaff is lying, and now he's calling Hal a liar, and how Percy was lying because he was a counterfeit, and fought an hour by the Shrewsbury clock. Again, this idea of time. Okay, if it may be believed so, if not, then let them that should reward valor bear the sin upon their own heads. So he's basically saying, if you deny me this honor, okay, that's going to be on you. You should believe me. John is completely befuddled. Okay, he's been in court trying to do
you know, his own job and also Hal's job. And he's not used to people like Falstaff, so he says, "This is the strangest tale I have ever heard." Just saying it like it is. And Hal says, "This is the strangest fellow, Brother John. If a lie may do thee grace, I'll gild it with the happiest terms I have." So Hal, up to this point, we'll tolerate Falstaff and we'll give him the honor. Now, later we find that, this honor is not what's good for Falstaff, but Falstaff is optimistic. Okay, he says, "If I grow great, I will grow less. For I'll purge and leave sack and leave cleanly as a nobleman should do." So, Falstaff promises that now that he's going to be given this great honor for killing Percy, he will grow great in power in the kingdom, but he'll grow less because he's going to purge his life from food and drink, and he's going to take lots of laxatives to skinny down and leave cleanly like a nobleman should do. Now, do we believe this argument? That's our final opinion question. Do you think that Falstaff will leave his old life behind now that he's got this honor? Again, this is something that's not answered in this play, but what do you think? Go ahead and pause the video, then we'll come back, have some final thoughts, and we'll end this incredibly long lecture. Alright, so go ahead and give me your opinion. Alright, welcome back. Hopefully you got that last opinion written down to submit. Okay, final scene. This should be a pretty quick one. Okay, we are in the command post of the king. Okay, we've got the king, Hal, Worcester, Vernon, and John Lancaster, the brother of Hal, son of the king. Okay, safety first. We'll get into that, and then Hotspur's prize. What is done with Hotspur's prize? Alright, final thoughts on the play. Okay, Worcester is captured. Okay, he once again gives his reasons for rebellion. What I have done, my safety urged me to do, and I embrace this fortune patiently. Okay, so he says, I did it because I felt threatened, and the only way I would feel safe is if I took down the kingdom. Okay, is that true? No, of course not. Worcester is lying to his grave. Okay, bear Worcester to the death, and Vernon too. Okay, again, Vernon took on the lies of Worcester, and he gets the penalty that Worcester gets. Okay. Hal relates that Douglas the Scot has been captured, and again, this is usually what Hotspur does. Okay, Douglas is Hotspur's prize, but now it's Hal's prize. Okay, so he's taken on Hotspur's role, and now he's got his prize. Okay, and at my tent, the Douglas is, I beseech you, or I beseech your grace, may I dispose of him. Okay, and the king answers, with all my heart. So, if we remember, the one thing that Hotspur had the hardest time doing was sharing, right? That he was fighting over land. Okay, he couldn't share with Glendower, but here Hal shows that he can share. So he turns to his brother, then Brother John Lancaster. To you, this honorable bounty shall belong. So Hal passes on this this duty to take care of Douglas to his brother. Okay, Hotspur's prize is now shared to his brother. Okay, so as we can see, Hal has taken on that second initiation. Okay, we're going to be talking about initiation in some of our other readings. So that might be a connection you want to be looking for in other readings. So, again, I want to thank you guys for bearing with me. There's no easy way with the time frame that we have to go through this. And if you made it to the end, pat yourself on the back. Okay, this is quite the accomplishment, and hopefully through discussing kind of the textual items in depth, hopefully you've got a little better sense of this play. Okay, and again, if you've got questions, feel free to bring them to my attention in any of the three forums or means described at the beginning of this lecture. Remember to submit your opinions that I had you formulate, and so that you can get credit for watching this incredibly long and probably a little bit boring lecture. All right, thank you, and we'll see you next time.